I found a major error in the U.S. religion census. Let me show you how I found it. The U.S. religion census is conducted every 10 years, and it's a huge undertaking. It's a census, not a poll, so it's not making phone calls or web surveys of random Americans. Instead, statistical information is gathered, when possible, directly from various religious groups throughout the U.S., asking them about the number of congregations that they have and the size of their membership. I'm a huge fan of data, and one of the things that the U.S. religion census publishes is this Excel spreadsheet. Not only does it have as many denominations and groups as possible with those statistics, but it also has a breakdown by state and even by county. That data can be put on a map like the census has released here, showing the largest religious group in each U.S. county. Blue is Catholic, pink is Southern Baptist, gray is the Mormon Church. Of course, many other people also take the data from the census and make their own maps and charts. As I've mentioned before, I love the graphs and charts that Ryan Burge makes and posts on X. He's made a chart that compares the relationship between education and weekly religious attendance in the U.S. versus Europe, which used the Cooperative Election Study and the European Social Survey as sources. Using data from Nationscape, he produced this fascinating chart showing that Americans who are age 80 are much more likely to choose Protestant over Christian when given both of those as poll options. People in their mid-50s pick at about the same rate, and people age 20 pick Christian 3 times more often than Protestant. One of his sources is the U.S. religion census too, and a few years back he posted this chart with that as a source. Here is the best estimate that exists of the 20 largest religious groups in the United States as of 2020. It's very interesting. The Catholic Church holds the number 1 spot, and non-denominational is a distant second, followed by Southern Baptists. But I noticed something off a bit further down, right here. In fact, I even replied at the time. Definitely a misprint about the National Missionary Baptist Convention. They had only around 250,000 adherents in 2010. But I didn't do anything at the time to look into it, and I forgot about this until recently, until I realized that the issue was even bigger than that. A few months ago, I decided to make a video about the top 10 largest Christian denominations in America. I'm still working on that one, but as I looked through the U.S. religion census data, I noticed that there was a big problem that's particularly noticeable when you compare 3 denominations' data. They are the National Baptist Convention USA, Inc., the National Baptist Convention of America, and the National Missionary Baptist Convention of America. Most of you are probably pretty unfamiliar with these 3 denominations. All 3 belong to the category that religious pollsters call historically black Protestant. The National Baptist Convention USA, Inc. formed first as a merger of 3 smaller groups in 1895. In 1915, the National Baptist Convention of America separated from them, and from this group, in 1988, the National Missionary Baptist Convention of America split. In the 2010 U.S. religion census, an appendix was published about statistics from African American church bodies, which said, traditionally, church bodies focused on the African American population have been less focused on gathering statistics than those groups largely composed of European Americans. This has made it difficult for such groups to take part in religion censuses focused on congregational location and size. The appendix goes on to say that though the census received lists from the 8 largest historically African American denominations, less than 50% of any group's churches or members were able to be identified. What that means is that most of these denominations report large numbers of members that can't seem to be found. As a result, the 2010 U.S. religion census reported numbers much smaller than some of those denominations claimed for themselves. The African Methodist Episcopal Church's 2.5 million number was adjusted down to 827,000. The African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church's number went from 1.4 million to 246,000, and the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church's number went from 850,000 to 236,000. Now, what were the statistics recorded for these 3 denominations? The numbers published in the 2010 U.S. religion census were National Baptist Convention USA, Inc., 1,535,087 members in 3,536 congregations, National Baptist Convention of America, Inc., 246,044 members in 575 congregations, and National Missionary Baptist Convention of America, 213,275 members in 1,283 congregations. Now, I have no special information to know how close these numbers are to reality, but everything I have seen, to me, indicates one basic fact. This is the right order of the 3. The original denomination, NBC USA, is by far the largest one. The one that split from it, NBCA, is next, and the one that split from them, NMBCA, is smallest. I'm going to provide compelling evidence for that in a moment, but here's the major error. In the 2020 U.S. religion census, somebody messed the numbers up. Here's the reported data from the 2020 census. Now, there are a few things to notice here. First, National Missionary Baptist Convention, Inc. is not the proper name of any U.S. denomination. I think that's important, but for now, let's assume that they're referring to the National Missionary Baptist Convention of America, or NMBCA, and we'll end up with these numbers in these places. Second, if that's the case, this denomination suddenly has become the largest of the three by far, especially when counting number of congregations. The order in the 2010 census was NBCUSA, NBCA, and MBCA. Now the order is NMBCA, NBCUSA, NBCA. Here's one guess of what happened, and then I'll give some evidence. I believe that someone involved with the 2020 census data accidentally assigned some of the data from the National Baptist Convention USA, Inc. to this National Missionary Baptist Convention, Inc. It's easy to do since the name is messed up, so it starts and ends the same way as the other two now. Because of that, the denomination that was number 3 is now number 1. The U.S. religion census states outright in an appendix that this is a known undercount, that their numbers are smaller than reality for these African American majority denominations. But that mixed with a major overcount of the NMBCA really causes some problems. Here's some evidence. The National Missionary Baptist Convention of America claims on their own website to have 400,000 members. Based on what the U.S. religion census found in the past, denominations over-reporting their membership, wouldn't it be surprising that in this case they have 2.4 million members and think that they only have 400,000? What about numbers of congregations? The NMBCA website doesn't say, but the Baptist World Alliance website, which it belongs to, lists the number of churches and members, though right now this is broken, it seems, showing 0. But if we go back a couple years on the Internet Archive, though the formatting is a bit messed up, you can see that it showed the NMBCA with 400,000 members and 300 churches, and also the NBC USA with its self-reported 8,415,000 members and 21,145 churches. That definitely fits with my theory. But I have more. The National Baptist Convention USA, Inc. has long been called the largest historically black denomination in the USA. USA Today calls them that, as does the World Council of Churches, Encyclopedia Britannica, the Associated Press, and the denomination itself. As for self-reported numbers on their own websites, the NBC USA claims 7.5 million members, NBCA claims 3.5 million, and as I said, NMBCA claims 400,000. All three denominations had an annual session or meeting this year. Let's see if we can see which one looks like it's from the largest denomination, which is the medium-sized, and which is the smallest. This is the annual meeting of NBC USA, which I believe to be largest, but the census reports as the middle denomination. Here's the annual session of NBCA, which the census says is the smallest, but I believe to be the middle denomination. And are you ready for the annual session of the denomination reported as the largest one in the religion census? Well, here it is. In my opinion, this appears to be the smallest group. Now, if I'm right, you'd expect to see some weird things as a result of numbers being swapped like this, and we've seen them. For example, Wikipedia is all messed up. Take the page for the National Missionary Baptist Convention of America, which I believe to be the smallest. First, the information panel on the right-hand side shows the inaccurate information, making it look way bigger than it should. At the bottom of the article, it notes that the NMBCA itself claims only 400,000 members, but says that the Association of Religion Data Archives has the bigger numbers, and then says that the NMBCA maintains a large presence in California, Texas, the Southeast, and portions of the Midwest, which is probably overstating things. The page for the NBC USA has both self-reported numbers and ARDA numbers in the information panel, which are widely divergent. Then later on it says, ARDA's 2020 study documented the National Missionary Baptist as the largest predominantly black Baptist denomination in the United States, with the NBC USA second. It's true that ARDA's data says that, but it's still wrong. If you take the 2020 religion census numbers and the 2010 ones as both accurate, you get some pretty wild comparisons. The Center for Analytics, Research and Development and Data of the United Church of Christ had a blog post about using the data, in which they said the following: By absolute values, the fastest growing religious group in the area is non-denominational Christian church, which the ARDA classifies as an evangelical Protestant tradition. In relative terms, the fastest growing was the National Missionary Baptist Convention of America, NMBCA, a prominent African American Protestant convention. The NMBCA had a remarkable 1,243.7% growth between 2010 and 2020. And yes, that's just what the numbers say. But what hits home hardest for me is every time I see one of these wonderful charts from Ryan Burge detailing some interesting fact about the top 10 or top 20 denominations. He posted this October 16. There are approximately 370,000 houses of worship across the United States. Here are the 40 religious groups with the most congregations. Burge notes that the non-denominational churches are probably undercounted, and the UMC has changed in size since the data was collected in 2020. But I can't see past the relatively tiny NMBCA being up here in 11th place when it belongs down in 100th place or so. Meanwhile, the NBC USA is down here due to the census's undercount, and the NBCA is left off totally. Or there's this epic post from October 20. Every denomination on here should be here, except this one. I did email Rich Housel, who is the contact person for the U.S. Religion Census, and presented this information on September 13th. He graciously responded, saying that he would give the information to the new committee which will oversee the 2030 study. I am confident that this will be corrected then, and they may even choose to make a correction to the 2020 data. But in the meantime, I'm letting you know, putting this out there. It's just one more piece of data that shows that even reliable sources don't always get everything right.